If the vehicle had stopped where we were, we would have been, I mean, out of there, because we couldn't walk back. And darkness would have hit. We didn't have food, water, none of that, man. So we had a little water in the car, but we didn't have any food. So we just kept driving, man. We kept driving. We drove so much to where the wheels, you could hear the ash inside the brake drum just squealing, and just, I didn't give a damn. I was trying to get, these folks to their children. But it got quiet in the car, because we all became, I ain't gonna lie, I was just like, I wasn't scared. I think I was more in shock over what was happening with, keep in mind, the ground's still moving. The earthquakes never stopped, so the volcano was still doing its thing. It wasn't full-blown eruption. The full-blown eruption had happened, but it was having these mini eruptions, so it was just constant, the ground constantly shaking. And then you got the typhoon coming in. So we finally made it to the location where my friend's child was and the Navy guy's child was. I think it was an Army base or something. We get to the front gate, and this is when I knew God had my back. When we got to the front gate, as soon as we drove in the gate, because the gate guard wasn't at the gate, he was back off a little bit in a big truck. As soon as we drove to that gate, the entire car just collapsed. Boof. It just collapsed. The whole axle just broke. Boof. But we made it to our destination. And I never forget, the military guy came over, who was supposed to be the guard at the gate. He says, man, where the hell did y'all come from? We told him. He says, what? He said, what are y'all doing out here, man? What are you? I'm like, man, look, I didn't want to hear it, man. We're trying to, where is everyone at? Because I'm trying to get them to their children. So he said, okay, just leave the car there. Just hop on in the truck. It's a big truck, big military truck. And so he took us and reconnected us with my friend's child and the Navy guy's child. So we stayed at that location probably 2 or 3 days, and food was very limited. It was so bad you couldn't flush the toilets. They said you're not allowed to take a bath. None of that. The reason you were not allowed to take a bath because they said to fill the bathtub up with water and just leave it in case needed for emergencies. And so you couldn't even flush the toilet, man. I mean, it was just horrible. We ended up staying, I don't know where we were staying, in another dorm. I don't know, man. It was just, someone was up in there, man. And I never forget, the only food we had was, somebody down below us, downstairs or something. They had some food that they offered to give us, little canned goods of chili and different things like that, eating it cold out of the can, you know what I'm saying? So we stayed there about 3 days, and then it got to the point where at that location, they needed volunteers. All the men volunteers, all the males, they actually had us, they picked certain ones. They didn't pick everybody. They said, hey, we need y'all to come and shovel some of this ash off roofs because everything's collapsing. And also they need to shovel a pathway for vehicles to get through. So once they did that, then there was, by that time, the leadership in the U.S. had made the decision to send everything to the Philippines. When I say everything, I'm talking about every commercial airplane in the area, every military airplane in the area, every naval ship in the area, commercial ship. The U.S. said everything get to the Philippines because you had 20,000 people to evacuate. So then we had to kind of wait a day or so to get notification when we would be taken to the Navy ship. That's the only way to get out of there because all the airports were closed. Planes couldn't get in and out of there. It was just that bad. Even the major airport in Manila was closed, shut down because of the ash. Because that stuff gets in airplane engines. You got gonna have a bad day. So, and then it got to the point when we were preparing to leave that location. And what they were doing was busing us from that location to a Navy port. A Navy port somewhere that had ships, and they, load us up on ships. But the crazy thing about it is the way they did it, though. Some people had to stay back because we had military assets that needed to be protected. Different things like that. So what they did, I kid you not, they had us all line up on a wall, and they almost went like eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Any, many, mighty, mo. Any, many, mighty, mo. If you were Mo, you would stay there. By the grace of God, my wife came back with me because there were families that were split up. You know, the husband had to come back. It was family split up. Let me just put it to you like that without getting too deep into it. So they got us on a bus, and then they took us to the Navy ship. It wasn't a large Navy ship. It was a medium-sized Navy ship. And what it was actually like an amphibious assault ship. It's basically, it's not your normal ship. It carries things. It carries weapons. It carries cargo. But it was empty. So the bottom of the ship was just a lot of room in there, just empty. And so they got us all in there. And there must have been, man, if I had to guess, it must have been 3,000 of us, 3,000 or 4,000 of us on the ship. And the only way to get out of there was this Navy ship had to sail to another part of the Philippines, away from destruction. 3 days in the ocean. 3 days in the middle of a typhoon, okay? And it was the worst experience because if y'all never been on any ocean before, you know how rough the seas can get at times. But just imagine hurricane, for y'all that don't know what a typhoon is, but just imagine a typhoon, you're trying to go through that stuff. But the Navy folks, they're very professional, and they made it happen. It took us 3 days to out on the ocean to get us where we need to be. And there was a lot of crazy things that happened on the ship, because on the ship you had literally everybody, just everybody and everything on the ship. I'm talking about animals, people, and they had us all just, they didn't even separate the animals from the people. They had everything just all mixed up, and dog poo everywhere, dogs barking, kids crying. You're talking 3,000 or 4,000 people. So a couple of us actually began to complain. I was one of them was complaining. I said, man, this is a health risk, because you got all these animals on the ship. First of all, nobody can sleep because they're barking all damn night. The ship is going crazy. You see Navy guys running crazy because in a typhoon, man, there's certain protocols they have to follow to make sure that nothing crazy happens with the ship. And I want to be mindful and tell everybody that the Navy folks on the ship, they got sleeping quarters on those ships, but they were gracious enough to give up their sleeping quarters, particularly for the women and children. So they have a decent place to sleep. It wasn't a lot of sleeping quarters, but it provided comfort for some folks. Once we complained about the animals on the ship, they did separate them. They put the animals on the end of the ship, all of them. And there were some crazy people that were still up in arms about that. But it was the right thing to do to separate the people and the animals, because you got to keep in mind, these animals, you don't even know if these animals had their vaccinations or shots. You know if they got rabies, none of that. They were not checking anything to get us out of there. They just put it on the ship and just roll out. So if you had a family pet or anything like that, nothing against those with family pets, but that was not, it was not conducive to a healthy situation with all those animals and everything. But the dog poop and just all type of stuff. So they separated us, and I never forget, man, everybody on the Navy ship just got sick from all the swaying and moving and trying to get through the typhoon and just swaying and moving. It was the craziest thing. And then I think after about 2 days, we finally had some clear weather to where it was kind of, got smoother. And they allowed everybody to kind of come up on top of the ship to kind of see out. And what we saw in the ocean was not destruction. We saw something beautiful. We saw blue waters, and we saw, waters that were taking us away from something just straight traumatic. One of the other interesting things about the naval ship, since we were out there 3 days, they were not used to having 4,000 people on this amphibious assault ship, which, probably, if I had to guess, those things probably maybe meant to hold 1,000, Marines, whatever. And this is the type of ship that would pull up to the land, doors open, and everything is coming out real quick in wartime. They're coming out, Marines coming, pushing equipment, and they're going at it. And for us, they gutted the ship, and they didn't have any equipment on there. So they took us to another place called Cebu, the ship, after 3 days. and beautiful islands in the southern part of the Philippines. I never forget everybody's out looking at these islands like, man, this is nice, you know. And so they got us off of Cebu. The reason we had to go to Cebu because Cebu, they had an old Air Force base called Mactan Air Base, Mactan. The Philippines had taken that base over. I think the Americans had used it years ago, but it was a Philippine base. So that was the only place they can get planes into. That's why we had to get in the Navy ship to go 3 days in the crazy ocean to get there, because that was called the staging areas where, you know, you got people coming in and you're trying to figure out, okay, how many people are gonna get on this plane? How many get on this plane? Because what they were doing, the planes at that location were flying to Guam. They were flying to Guam, which is the next stop for us. And so they finally got us on the plane, and the plane was freezing. It was a military plane. I had been on these planes many times, but some of the other folks had never even been on these planes before. Keep in mind, I'm a flight line guy. I've been on every type of plane you could think of. So, but it was cold. It was cold, and they don't have airplane seats like you think. It was a C-141, and you sit lined up against the wall. So we're facing each other. So you got a line over there, and you got a line over here, and in the middle you may have had some bags and, you know, stuff they had tied down, people's luggage or whatever, little bags, whatever they could handle. And I felt so bad for the folks that were not used to the plane, because it gets really cold in those planes, really cold in 141. Again, this is not United Airlines or American Airlines or anything like that. This is a C-141 cargo plane. So we get to Guam. And when the plane landed, we immediately noticed there was a lot of people in an area off to the side of where the plane landed, with big tents and buildings and or something. What it was, there were a lot of volunteers, people from the Air Force Base in Guam, who were accepting people, and they had everything from diapers to baby wipes to food to underwear to t-shirts, just everything. I mean, they did a great job of really, you know, coming through, and Americans helping Americans, and I don't even want to say Americans helping Americans. It was the human spirit on full display, the human spirit, and you know, they had folks that are also offered to take families into their own homes, and so we sat around there a couple of hours until I don't know how, but a family ended up saying they could take one of the families that was stationed there in Guam said they could take in one of the evacuees. We were considered an evacuee. So they took us on, and we actually stayed with them, man, probably 5 days. We stayed there 5 days until they could figure out how to get us back to the U.S. Because remember, you're talking 20,000 people. 20,000 people. Everybody had to go through Guam. And everybody had to get on these ships. So we were on a mid-sized ship. Some people were on huge aircraft carriers that carried thousands and thousands of people, you know. So every type of ship you could think of was there. They had, they also had local vessels who were, you know, helping move people and things like that. But the family that took us in, man, I can't thank them enough for what they did. I mean, they really opened their home to us. It was a brother and sister, and they opened their home to us. I mean, they both were working. They would go to work each morning and tell us, hey, here's food, they give the door key. I mean, they you know, they did great by us. And I think to show our appreciation, I think my wife ended up cooking for them and things like that. But they would take us shopping and get us fruits, and if we needed some clothes and, you know, things like that. So after about 5 days, now it was time to go back to the U.S. They finally got us a flight on a, I'm not for sure type of plane. It was a big plane, may have been another 747. But keep in mind, U.S. leadership directed every aircraft, Navy aircraft, civilian aircraft, United Airlines, American Airlines, Delta. They told them all, get to the Philippines now. any way you can to get these people, or go to a safe area where you can get them. So, man, my thank you to them, because those are the unsung heroes. Those folks that really went out of their way to get us out of there. So we ended up getting on the flight out of Guam and ended up going to Washington State. And again, in Washington State, you had the same thing. You had a lot of volunteers along the way. They had care packages. I mean, just stuff everywhere. Cookies, I mean, food, diapers, some of the necessities, the essentials. And I never forget when we got to Washington State, everybody had to go through a briefing. And here's where it got kind of interesting. So everybody went through a briefing in front of a high-ranking leader, and I think they had us in like maybe groups of 50, and they would get us and set on some bleachers, and he would get in front of us, and he'd say, "Hey, I know y'all have been through a very traumatic event. Just know that the U.S. is doing everything we can, you know, to make sure you folks are safe and get home safe and everything." But the thing that struck me was the next thing he said. He said, "Now, there's something I gotta ask everybody." He said, "There's anybody right now that wants to get out of the military right now, please raise your hand and we'll make it happen. We'll get you out." And not just kick you out. They would, I guess there's something on the books that said if you've gone through a traumatic event like that, then you have the option of the military letting you out, because it's just too traumatic to keep going, you know. Obviously, no one raised their hands. You know why? Because we left all of our stuff in the Philippines. We have all furniture, cars, everything was left in the Philippines. Like everything. My wife's family ended up, you know, trying to take care of our house, but they were, man, everybody was pillaging and stealing and all type of stuff. And I'll get into that later, but you can't blame them. But no one took that offer of getting out of the military right then. Not until they did right by us. They gave us some money for our furnishings and our vehicles, or gave us our furnishings and our vehicles. And so the other thing the colonel said, when no one raised their hand, he warned us. He said for everybody to be very, very careful, because they had gotten word that, keep in mind, 20,000 people trying to come to the U.S. And before, I told you about the folks, Air Force Finance, that were giving people cash money. So every other day, you go over there and they give you cash. You sign your name, they give you cash. And they probably give you $300 every other day, something like that. Didn't seem like a lot of money, but I mean, back then, 1991, that was $300 every other day. You end up having a pocket full of money with nothing to do with it, because you can't spend it. But he warned us, because a lot of military folks were getting jacked, getting robbed at airports, because people knew these folks had money on them. I don't know, man. It was just the most disgusting thing. So they told us to be very extra careful when going through those airports and things like that. So we finally did make it back to Fort Worth. And everything just kind of blanked out for me at that point, because I was just, to say traumatized wouldn't even, that doesn't even do it justice. It doesn't do it justice, not for what happened with me. You got to keep in mind that I left because my grandfather passed away. And it was the most painful thing I'd ever felt at that time. But I didn't even have time to grieve his passing. Just keep in mind, I got to Fort Worth. They had already had the funeral and everything. Forget little old Eric is trying to get back to the States to see his grandfather off. Forget that. But like I said, it is what it is. It is what it is. We got back to Fort Worth. That same darkness that was there that I mentioned before about the crack and everything else, it was there, but it didn't, my focus was not even on it. I didn't care about none of that stuff. All I cared about was trying to get normal. And one thing I did mention is that we had equilibrium problems, bad. When I say equilibrium, I'm talking about just walking, you're like stumbling. Because for days and days and days, the earth was shaking. It was shaking during this volcano. And even the sounds, you know, you could hear the sound of the volcano when it erupted. We were there. I still remember looking up and seeing lightning in the middle of it wasn't from, the lightning was not from rain clouds. The lightning was from the, I don't know, man. I'm not a scientist, but whatever was happening when that stuff went up, man, it just caused lightning. And it was just the most horrific thing. But we had equilibrium problems. I had problems, man, for weeks. I'm talking weeks. Like I was just dizzy and just constantly, me and my wife, and just dizzy. And the Air Force gave us some time off. They gave us time off and told my next assignment then, they sent me to Abilene, Texas. And they had put the word out for everybody that was evacuated out of the Philippines that they ought to be taken care of. They ought to be given the highest priority. And let me tell you, they gave us the highest priority. When I ended up going to Abilene, which was the next assignment after the volcano, they told me to take a month off. They said, man, take a month off. Just let us know where you are. Just keep checking in. You take care of yourself. You've been through some horrible things. And so we took a month off, I think, and we just kind of hopped around with friends and everything to try to make sense of what had just happened. And I never had a chance to really process my grandfather's passing, let alone trying to go through something horrific like a volcanic eruption. Now, keep in mind, the Mount Pinatubo eruption was the largest eruption in over 100 years. It was one of the most destructive, largest eruptions on record. This eruption was so big that it actually changed the temperature of the earth, I think by point-something degrees or something like that. And scientists will tell you that's huge. That's huge when you're talking about climate, things like, the polar ice caps melting, things like that. Because this ash cloud, you can see it from space. The folks at the International Space Station or on the shuttle or whatever, they could literally see it. They saw this huge ash cloud from space. That's just how big it was. And just to think, I was only, 30 miles from this thing, man. At most 30 miles from it. So we got back to the States. We hopped around for a while. They sent me to Abilene. And then there was the issue of, we had no furniture, we had no vehicle, we had nothing. So the Air Force, they gave us furniture to loan. On military bases, they have furniture for folks living on bases. So they gave us, furniture to borrow. They put us up in some housing. Make sure we had transportation, things like that. And at some point, we had to fill out what's called a claim to claim whatever it is we left in the Philippines. Keep in mind, everything was left there. Everything. The car, all the furniture, electronics, clothes, everything was left in the Philippines. And they had military guys to go in after the volcano to try to, recoup what they could and retrieve what they can. But man, it was a lot of that stuff was just trashed by this time. And so what they sent to us in crates and boxes were stuff full of volcanic ash. And this stuff had already started corroding the metals and things like that, because that ash is like, it's a very, it's a strong element, when you put it up against metal and things like that. But it just pretty much destroyed everything. So we ended up filing a claim for all of our furniture and trying to figure out, okay, what did I have, what I didn't have? And then we had to file a claim for the car, because the car was also, the car was still at the Army base, but they ended up paying us for it. And I think all told, they ended up paying us, it was probably like $22,000 for all of our stuff. And in my opinion, we probably should have got more for it. It's just, we couldn't remember what we had lost. And so the trauma from that experience, from the volcano, the earthquakes, the typhoon, being in the middle of the ocean for 3 days, having buildings collapse, a child killed, rocks falling out of the sky hitting you, my grandfather passed away, going back to Fort Worth, seeing the crack genocide, not epidemic. It wreaked havoc on a young mind like mine. And even to this day, it's still one of the most traumatic things I've ever been through. I mean, it literally it literally, I don't know how to explain it. It rewired me. It rewired me. And when I say rewired, I don't mean make me crazy. It did something, man. It I don't know. I would have headaches and just equilibrium, and then later on I had respiratory issues, which I didn't even connect it to. Like, I'm talking about within the last year. Within the last year, this has been 34 years. So within the last year, I started to realize, wait a minute, this ash was not just regular ash. It was like phosphorus. You could smell it. I mean, it like a match. If you take a match and smell it, multiply that times 100. That's what it smelled like at that location, the Philippines, when that thing blew. So, yeah, it was a very traumatic event. Happened in June of 1991, right at the same time my grandfather passed away. Not only did I leave the Philippines, heading towards the Fort Worth, grieving, I left Fort Worth going back to the Philippines, grieving, and then went right in the middle of destruction. So, you know, for years, I mean, even to this day, I cannot get that out of my head, what happened. I can't. And I think the story needs to be told because, you know, my background is in psychology and behavioral health, and I felt that the best way for me to manage it is to use the same advice I would give to others. You know, anybody that's been through trauma, you know, find a support system, get some help, seek help, what have you. But yeah, it was a very traumatic event. I do plan on going back to the Philippines to visit. I have not a desire. I feel like I have a need to go back and climb this mountain, go back and look at this volcano. Because if you see it now, and I'll put some pictures up. I think I put a picture up of a really blue lake that used to be Mount Pinatubo. That was the epicenter. That's where all the action took place. And in my mind, I always think about the force that was there in that location to be that close to the volcano, man. And some of the natives there, the folks that let the officials know that something was going on, they refused to leave the mountain up near the volcano. They've been there for thousands of years. They refused to leave. And so a lot of them were killed. A lot of them lost their lives for refusing to leave. But yeah, man, I don't wish that on anybody. I don't. It was just such a traumatic event. The best way for me to try to deal with it is to speak to it, which is why I decided to do it today after 34 years. Some of the details. There were a lot of things that I left out. I could go on and on about this, but I believe I hit the high points, and I hit the high points. God is good. You know, I could have lost my life several times, particularly driving when the volcano blew. I could have lost my life, man, you know, but I just, I come from a praying family. I'm not even for sure if they knew what was going on at the time. I don't know. We were just in such a fog. And I never got counseling for it or anything like that. And for me, it got worse because when I got to Abilene, after the 30 days, you know, of downtime for me to get myself together, that's when they started sending me around the world into hotspots like Rwanda and Somalia. You know, all these places around the world, man, where it's just conflict and humanitarian crisis going on. And keep in mind, I hadn't had a chance to process my grandfather's passing. I hadn't had a chance to process Mount Pinatubo. I hadn't had a chance to process the child that was killed in that gym we're in. I hadn't had time to process a whole bunch of stuff. So it's just trauma on top of trauma on top of trauma. And so I'm not afraid to say that I have PTSD. Yes, I have PTSD. I've been diagnosed with PTSD. Some people look at me and when they hear about what happened, they're like, oh my God, oh my goodness. But, you know, for me, all I can do is just keep giving thanks to God that we made it out safe and in one piece. But I pray for those who lost their lives. I pray for those who are suffering today. And I pray for those whose lives will never be the same again. So with that, I'll end this. I'll end it. But, you know, the trauma, I keep saying trauma, but trauma is not even a good word for it. What happened with us 20,000 that were evacuated. You know, some fared well, you know. We didn't fare so well because of just the situation, you know, coming back from the States. And, you know, I can't think straight because I'm still trying to process my grandfather passing and them burying him before I got back. So, but God is good. God is good. Ended up doing a long career in the Air Force, retired. But I never forgot about that event. I will go back to visit Mount Pinatubo. I have to. And I did receive, I spoke to some people about it, not counselors or anything like that, just confidants about what had happened. They were very supportive and in shock, just in total shock. But yeah, crazy story. Hey, this is Eric Brown, MOBO-Media. Thanks for listening to me on this story. I'll talk about, you know, other aspects of Mount Pinatubo at some point. But I think this is the first step towards healing, because I never healed from that. I never healed from my grandfather passing. I never healed from a small child getting killed. I never healed from driving with these two folks in the back seat who were looking for their children. And I know it's on me to get them there. And we were in total survival mode in doing it. And so if I had to do it all over again, I would do it again, because that's who I am. This is Eric Brown, MOBO-Media. Thanks for listening. Y'all take care. Bye-bye.